The sun beat down on the Greek island of Kos that July afternoon in 1991. A toddler's laughter had filled the air only moments earlier as 21-month-old Ben Needham toddled around a dusty yard near his grandparents' farmhouse. His mother, Kerry, had been at work nearby, while her parents kept a watchful eye on their grandson. But in a single instant, the kind that defines a lifetime, that laughter was gone. When the adults looked again, Ben was nowhere to be seen. His toy car stood abandoned in the dirt, the silence broken only by the calls of his desperate family. Panic turned to terror as minutes stretched into hours, and the island that had seemed so peaceful became the backdrop of one of Britain's most haunting mysteries, the disappearance of little Ben Needham. Before we begin, I want to thank my amazing viewers and subscribers for your support through your likes, shares, and comments. Your engagement helps make these stories more meaningful. If you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts. Ben Needham was born on October 29, 1989, in Sheffield, South Yorkshire, England. He was the first child of Kerry Needham, a young mother navigating life with determination despite limited resources. From the beginning, Ben was described as a lively, curious, and affectionate little boy, the kind of child whose cheeky grin could light up a room and whose energy kept everyone on their toes. Kerry, like many young mothers, relied heavily on the support of her parents, Christine and Eddie Needham, who adored their grandson. The Needhams were a close-knit working-class family, but they faced their share of struggles. Sheffield in the late 1980s and early 1990s was a city in transition, scarred by the decline of its steel industry and limited economic opportunities. Life was not easy. When an opportunity arose for Eddie to work abroad in construction, the family made a bold decision. They would relocate, at least temporarily, to the Greek island of Kos. It was a place with promise, sun-soaked days, steady work, and the chance for a better quality of life. By 1991, Kerry, her parents, and young Ben were settling into their new chapter on the island. Ben quickly adapted to his new surroundings. He loved exploring outdoors, toddling around the family's modest farmhouse, and playing with simple toys. Neighbors remembered seeing him chasing after animals in the yard, laughing as he tested his newfound independence. To Kerry, he was everything, the reason she worked so hard, and the source of her strength as a single mother. But beneath the idyllic setting, there were challenges. The farmhouse itself was still under renovation, and childcare was often a juggling act between Kerry and her parents. Life on Kos was far removed from Sheffield, and though the community was warm, the island was also a place where outsiders could feel vulnerable. On July 24th, 1991, those vulnerabilities would collide with fate in the most devastating way. To understand the disappearance of Ben Needham, it's important to picture life as it was on the Greek island of Kos in the summer of 1991. The island, with its picturesque beaches and whitewashed homes, was a blend of tourism and tradition. But outside the bustling tourist areas, there were rural pockets where life moved slower, homes were modest, and communities were tightly interwoven. The Needhams lived in such a place, a half-renovated farmhouse in the village of Iroquois, surrounded by dry fields and scattered homes. Eddie, Ben's grandfather, had taken on construction work to provide stability for the family, while Christine helped with childcare. Kerry worked shifts nearby to support her son. The arrangement was practical, but like many families balancing work and young children, it meant moments when supervision required careful coordination. The farmhouse itself was not without risks. It wasn't fully secured. Open spaces and unfinished areas meant a toddler could wander without much difficulty. Windows and doors lacked modern safety features, and the surrounding area was rural, with dirt roads, stone walls, and fields stretching toward more isolated terrain. For a curious toddler, it was both a playground and a danger. Still, nothing had prepared the Needhams for what would unfold. On July 24th, 1991, the day began like many others. The heat on Kos was already climbing by mid-morning, cicadas buzzing the background as the family went about their routines. Kerry left for work, confident that her parents would care for Ben while she earned a living to support him. Ben, as always, was playful and adventurous. Family members later recalled him pushing his yellow toy car, toddling around in the dust near the farmhouse. It was an ordinary day until it wasn't. The Needhams were used to letting Ben roam the yard, always keeping a watchful eye. But the family's attention was divided: construction tasks, household chores, and the bustle of daily life in a rural setting. In those brief gaps, a toddler's curiosity could carry him farther than expected. Some locals later mentioned that the area saw the occasional visitor, laborers, travelers, or strangers passing through. Though no one suspected imminent danger, there was a sense in hindsight that the Needhams were outsiders in a small, insular community. They didn't know everyone, and not everyone knew them. As midday approached, the heat grew heavier, the cicadas louder, and life seemed to slow in the farmhouse. Ben was last seen playing in the yard, his small figure dwarfed by the unfinished stone walls around him. Then, in a heartbeat, he was gone. It was July 24th, 1991, an ordinary summer's day on Kos. The Needham family were at the farmhouse in Iroquois, going about their daily routines. The sun was relentless, casting sharp shadows across the dusty ground. A light breeze moved through the olive trees, but it did little to break the weight of the heat. Kerry Needham had left for work earlier that morning. She kissed Ben goodbye, never imagining it would be the last time she'd see him as the playful toddler she knew. Her parents, Christine and Eddie, remained behind, overseeing both the house renovations and childcare. Ben dressed lightly for the heat, played happily in the yard with his toy cars. He was a child brimming with energy, always eager to explore. Around midday, the atmosphere was one of normality. Eddie was doing construction tasks. Christine tended to household chores, and Ben was weaving between them, his laughter echoing in the dry summer air. But at some point in that narrow window, everything changed. When Christine looked up, Ben was no longer in sight. At first, she thought he had wandered a little farther down the path or behind the farmhouse. But after calling his name and checking the familiar spots, panic began to rise. Eddie dropped what he was doing, joining the search. Minutes stretched unbearably. A toddler couldn't have gone far, and yet Ben was gone. The family began scouring the immediate area, the yard, the house, the path, even the nearby fields. Kerry was called home from work. She rushed back, her heart pounding, expecting to find her little boy safe, hiding, maybe asleep in some unexpected corner. But the minutes became hours, and no trace of Ben appeared. The farmhouse quickly became the epicenter of chaos. Neighbors arrived to help search, shouting Ben's name into the dry air. Villagers fanned out into fields, ditches, and nearby groves. Yet, despite the scale of the effort, there was no sign of him. When Greek police were finally contacted, their response was hampered by several challenges. First was a time delay. Precious hours had already passed since Ben was last seen. Second, there were language barriers between the Needhams, who spoke English, and the local officers. And third, the handling of the scene was far from controlled. The yard where Ben had been playing was trampled by dozens of searchers. If there had been footprints, tire tracks, or clues, many were erased before trained investigators could document them. Items were moved, and potential evidence was overlooked. Some early reports suggested that Ben may have been spotted on a road nearby. Others hinted at the possibility of abduction, with rumors that a passing vehicle could have taken him. But without concrete evidence, the theories remained speculative. By nightfall, the farmhouse was illuminated by flashlights and lanterns as the desperate search continued. The cicadas that filled the air during the day were replaced by the eerie silence of the night, a silence broken only by Kerry's anguished calls for her son. From that moment on, the case would carry the weight of uncertainty, suspicion, and 1,000 unanswered questions. The summer heat on Kos still hangs in memory when people recall the disappearance of little Ben Needham. Nearly 3 decades after his vanishing, investigators continue to chase shadows, determined not to let a story fade into myth. British police, alongside Greek authorities, worked tirelessly, but the case was plagued with frustration. Theories about abduction by a passing family, an accident involving local workers, or even trafficking into another country filled newspapers for years. Each theory carried its own weight of sorrow, yet none offered closure. But in 2012, 21 years after Ben's disappearance, a new light flickered. That year, British detectives announced they would re-examine the case from the ground up. Advances in forensic science and renewed public attention gave them hope. The South Yorkshire Police secured funding from the UK government to support a full-scale operation on coast. Excavations were planned. Ground-penetrating radar was used across the Needham family's old farmhouse and surrounding land. Specialist forensic anthropologists were brought in to analyze the soil for even the faintest trace of human remains. It was a race against both time and memory. Would the earth itself still hold secrets after 20 years? During these excavations, a startling theory gained traction. Investigators spoke with locals and construction workers who had been present in the area in 1991. One worker came forward with a haunting suggestion. On the very day Ben disappeared, heavy machinery, including a digger, had been operating near the farmhouse. Could it be that Ben had wandered into harm's way and suffered a tragic accident? The theory suggested that in a moment of panic, workers might have covered up the accident, never realizing the ripple effect it would have for decades. This possibility tore at the hearts of Ben's family. His mother, Kerry, was devastated at the thought that her little boy's life might have ended so suddenly, not by abduction, not by malice, but by a cruel accident and silence. Between 2012 and 2016, multiple digs were conducted on coast. In 2016, a large-scale excavation began after more testimony surfaced about the construction work that had occurred at the time of Ben's disappearance. British police, working with Greek officials, dug across the fields near the farmhouse. The air was thick with tension. Journalists lined the roads. For weeks, officers combed through earth, searching for any sign of Ben, his clothing, his shoes, even fragments that might confirm his presence. Items, including a toy car believed to belong to Ben, were uncovered. The toy matched the type Ben had been seen playing with that summer. To investigators, this was not just a discovery. It was a voice in the past, whispering of a child who had been there, who had left something behind in the dirt. But no remains were found. The excavation closed, and with it, the last tangible hope for definitive closure seemed to slip through the family's fingers. For Kerry Needham, every dig was both a lifeline and a wound. She described the torment of living in constant uncertainty, unable to grieve properly, unable to celebrate milestones. Would Ben have grown into a teenager who loved football? Would he become a young man building his future in Sheffield? Every year that passed was stolen time. Her public pleas often reflected a mix of hope and anguish. If Ben is alive, please let us know. If he's not, please help us find him. We need to bring him home. Ben's disappearance often drew comparisons to later high-profile cases, like that of Madeleine McCann in 2007. Both cases involved young children vanishing while abroad, sparking international media frenzies. However, Ben's case was the first to show the world just how complex cross-border investigations could be. Different legal systems, limited resources, and cultural barriers created obstacles at every step. This was not just a family's tragedy. It was a cautionary tale that changed how authorities would later respond to missing child reports. Despite the diggers' findings, alternative theories continued to swirl. Abduction for adoption. Some believe Ben had been taken by a desperate family who raised him as their own. Trafficking networks. Rumors spread about organized groups targeting vulnerable children. Accident and cover-up. The theory backed by excavation evidence suggested Ben may have died on-site and been buried accidentally under rubble. Each theory divided public opinion. Some offered hope that Ben might still be alive. Others forced his family to face the unbearable. Unlike cases where perpetrators are caught and tried, Ben's story offers no definitive ending. There was no trial, no sentencing, no justice system to deliver answers. Instead, there was silence. A silence that stretched across decades, broken only by fleeting leads that faded as quickly as they appeared. Let me pause here to ask you, how would you live if someone you loved simply vanished one day? Would you cling to hope, or would you prepare yourself for grief? This is the very paradox Kerry Needham has lived with for over 30 years. The disappearance of Ben Needham reshaped how missing child cases were handled, both in the UK and abroad. Increased cooperation between nations. Future investigations like the McCann case saw stronger coordination thanks in part to lessons learned from Ben. Awareness campaigns. Ben's face became one of the first widely circulated images in international missing child campaigns. Charity work. Kerry and her family worked with organizations to raise awareness about missing children, ensuring other families would never feel as isolated as they once did. Even without closure, the Needham family has remained steadfast. Kerry, in interviews as recent as the 2020s, has expressed a determination to keep Ben's memory alive. She often speaks directly to her son, wherever he may be. Ben, if you're out there, know that we love you. We've never stopped looking. The cruelest part of Ben Needham's story is that it has no ending. Unlike other cases where the truth, however painful, eventually emerges, this mystery remains open. Some believe time will eventually reveal what happened. Others fear that the truth lies buried forever, lost to history. But what is undeniable is a mark Ben left, not just on his family, but on all who hear his story. And that brings us to the end of this case. A story so disturbing it leaves you questioning how many others are suffering in silence. What are your thoughts on this case? Let me know in the comments. If this story shook you, there's more on the channel that dives into cases just as haunting. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this video. It helps keep these stories from being forgotten. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.